welcome. We're going to let you filter in here. We've got a big group of registrants today. Last I heard, over 318 of you registering for today's session. Fantastic. Across the food manufacturing sector, food tech sector, and some fellow industry supporters, not-for-profit, government, etc. We're really, really happy to see you. Uh, Today, you're joining the Canadian Food Innovation Network. So, if you're surprised by that or by what I'm about to say next, you might be in the wrong spot. But you're joining us for the Building Resilient Food Supply Chains Through Canadian Innovation webinar. We're so excited about the turnout and really excited to just share some interesting strategies for how to cope with the sort of new norm of volatility today. So, a little bit about myself. I'm Alex Barlow. I'm the Vice President Programs here at the Canadian Food Innovation Network. I'm based in Kingston, Ontario. And my role here at the organization is to run our regional as well as federal funding programs that look to help companies break down innovation barriers, usually the biggest one being, money, and then work to help and support our active projects as they access those funds. If you've never heard of CFIN before, we are a 5-year-old organization. We're national, and we're here really to do sort of four key things. We're here to fund transformative and transferable food tech innovations. So, as noted, that's really sort of my work or my team's work here at CFIN. We're here to connect industry leaders such as yourselves on the call today, our speakers, innovators, and funders to break down barriers. We're a big country. Not many of us always have the opportunity to connect. We foster Canada's most engaged food innovation community housed on our digital platform called Yodel. And our end goal is really to position Canada as a global leader in food innovation. And when we think about resilient supply chains, I really believe that innovation is a core component to driving resiliency in the face of all the volatility that is really kind of becoming the new normal. Disruptions are becoming a key part of every day. And so today's webinar is really bringing together a diverse group of both tech adopters, food processors, leaders from that part of the supply chain, as well as food innovators to talk about, where exposure to volatility originates and what the realities look like, in our businesses, what Canadian built technologies and how Canadian innovation can strengthen our domestic supply chain, and how to hopefully evaluate and choose where we can make smart investments, whether it's in automation, domestic sourcing, digital infrastructure to improve margins and reduce some of our exposure to shocks. So before I kick it off and introduce our panelists and provide them a chance to take over the mic, just a couple housekeeping items. In a second, we're going to be launching a poll. We'd love to know what kind of attendees have joined us today, and I really encourage your participation just to let us know where you sit in this space. It'll help form some of perhaps the perspectives that we pull together throughout the session. We are taking Q&A. It is very hard to monitor the chat while also being your host. And so I would ask you to please put your questions in the Q&A box throughout, and we'll likely address them at the end, or we can do a follow-up if appropriate via email. And if it's super interesting or really relevant, we'll try and sneak it in and speak to your perspective. Great breakdown here. Thanks everyone for participating. Lastly, At CFIN, all of our webinars offer real-time text-based translations in over 60 languages. So if English is not your preferred language to take in this session today, you can click on the Wordly app in your window, and you can go ahead and access a real-time translation in French or any other language. And the link is in the chat. And the session is being recorded and it will be shared post-event. And so if you miss it, or if you have someone missing this, or if there was something you really want to hear again, you'll be able to find this after the fact. So want to again ground this in, the sort of realities of what we're dealing with today. And I think that that's probably true in food and beverage as much as in probably many elements of the Canadian economy. When it comes to food, in March, CFIN released our report, Building Resilient Food Supply Chains Through Canadian Innovation. And that report and its findings really underscored a pretty sobering reality. And it's, that pressures facing our sector today, ones that we might be feeling when we go and check out at the grocery store, are not temporary hurdles. There are structural shifts happening in our economy as well as the global economy around things like rising input costs, unpredictable sourcing. The sector is one that has notoriously thin margins, and these have become the baseline in an environment where volatility is the constant. I think we might take stability as a little bit of a refresher these days. That might seem like the unusual thing. And so to navigate this, food businesses are often looking more and more towards technology and innovation to survive and hopefully to build a more certain future. And so today, thankfully, probably for all of you, you're not just going to be listening to my opinions about this. We have four panelists joining us to dig into the lived experience of navigating these shifts. We have Keenan Sprague, president of Sprague Foods. Keenan leads a multi-generational family business that has become a Canadian benchmark for agile, high-quality processing and modernizing traditional food categories. We've got Doug Alexander, Vice President of Sustainability and Government Relations at Belmont Food Group. Doug brings deep industry expertise to the intersection of sustainable operations, policy, and long-term supply chain stability. And then on our innovation side, we're joined by Luke Scales, CEO and co-founder of Arbia. Luke is building digital infrastructure and traceability tools that allow Canadian food businesses to use data as a shield against supply chain volatility. And last but not least, Wayne McIntyre, co-founder and CEO of Relocalize. Wayne is at the forefront of supply chain innovation, pioneering a centralized micro factory. I think you can see one in the background of his image. And it's designed to reduce carbon footprints and return processing power to domestic markets. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us. I'm really excited to get into this conversation. First, I'd love to sort of test my assertions that may perhaps validate that there are indeed challenges and that they exist. And so, Doug, I'll start with you. Our latest CFIN report really drives home that the new normal for food processing in this country is, thin margins and volatility. And whether it's, our spikes in import costs or the ongoing unpredictability of global trade, it seems like the pressure on operators has become constant. Um, as an established Canadian processor, how has the definition of risk changed over the last few years at Belmont? And any changes in how you do, in how you manage sourcing and your margins?
Well, thanks, Alex. 40 years in the food industry, predominantly in protein, I've seen a lot of ups and downs and challenges. So through the 80s, 90s, and through the 2000s. I think the biggest concern right now that I have is business confidence. where people see the, micro challenges we have and they fixate on them, and we really don't progress enough to get things done. And I think that weakens confidence. So, for the last 15, 20 years, as an industry, we've looked at innovation and really want to be more focused on innovation and develop that. But we de-link that from investment attraction. And I think investment attraction is where we suffer the most because whether it's productivity, where we lag 23% behind the US on competitiveness, where we really would like to do more on innovation, where we need to expand capacity and scale. They all really suffer around investment attraction, and that's rooted in confidence. And if you can make a promise to your customer, and in Canada, it's particularly challenging because of retail concentration, but as well as in the food service sector, there's a bit of concentration there as well. When you make a promise to deliver something, you have to do it on time. And culturally, we challenge that notion of getting the project done, attracting the investment, and getting it done on time to deliver the promises that you keep. We really need to celebrate that. We talk a lot about innovations in technology and scale and square footage and investments, but we really don't talk about what we're making. And I think we need to get back to those roots of, I'm making, Coca-Cola in Brampton is investing significantly and they make a recognized brand and they'll celebrate the fact that they're making Coca-Cola a very stable brand and they're investing very strongly in that. I think we need to focus on that broadly, on what we make rather than the how we make it or the square footage or maybe innovations in some ways. So I think it's more around business confidence and investment attraction.
Hmm, interesting. Yeah, and the investment encouragement, perhaps not always even about attracting more dollars into your business, but having again that confidence to use them and deploy them. Keenan, you're in, I think, a 100-plus-year-old business, if I remember correctly, about Sprague, or certainly multi-generation. Curious how your, definitions or how you've approached risk and managing that in your business over the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, it's been a challenging 100 years, but we're still here. In our industry, canned food, canned soup, canned chili, canned beans, we've actually seen an exodus of canning operations out of Canada over many decades. Most notably, Campbell's left took all of their manufacturing to the States. So we've been swimming against the current. We're small in our industry. We're about 64 employees now. But we've been holding our own by innovating and leaning into our Canadian suppliers. A big switch we made recently is we now source all of our packaging from Canada. A few years ago, the Quebec government recognized that Canada had no food can manufacturers, so they supported a startup out of Quebec. And that's really good for Canada's food security. It's really good for Sprite getting a lower cost can and a better quality can. So it's a good example of a positive development. But with this trade turmoil, we've seen some distortions in the market that we've never seen before. We like to source Canadian beans, for example, and there's been occasions when all of the Ontario's navy beans have been purchased by our big competitor in Tennessee, Bush Beans, because they have the call out made with Canadian beans. So um, we hadn't seen that before.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, as you were saying, margins are a constant challenge with what we do, especially in canned food. The consumer's convinced that they're paying too much. And at the same time, we're trying to clear a positive margin. And so it's an ongoing tension.
Yeah, and to me, actually, I think at least in your own label, and I've had a few of the Sprague labeled products. I actually think that your branding's a great example of that Canadian storytelling and building a really robust sort of brand, in my opinion, that sort of responds to some of what Doug was noting there. Um, So, okay, this is perspective from, adopters of innovation, from players who are live in the space every day. Luke, from your perspective as an innovator, what is the biggest blind spot you see in the Canadian supply chain? And, what are traditional business models really struggling to address in this sort of modern era of volatility?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I see time and time again with a lot of manufacturers and businesses throughout the supply chain is really getting a real-time view into your cost of goods sold. Input costs are changing all the time. Being able to capture the right data, being able to understand and get insights from that data in real time is a real challenge. Like ultimately, these businesses are creating a wealth of data, but typically they're living across fragmented systems. So operators are essentially flying blind and typically using spreadsheets to glue their operations together. But you're entering data after the fact into these spreadsheets. By the time you create them, they're already stale data. So, at Arbia, we help to unite this data that you're already creating, help you to capture more of that data, and really helping to give you a real-time view on your business performance. You can then use that data with AI to automate a lot of the busy work as well. Like cost of labor is probably your largest controllable cost, operational cost. By using AI agents, you can ensure that every labor hour is as effective as possible and as productive as possible.
Yeah, we've seen some great projects and small businesses using agentic AI to drive scheduling, for example, and really optimize equipment utilization. So I agree. There's a lot of opportunities there, and certainly I find it hard just to keep track of global news, let alone global impacts on pricing or my day-to-day life. So I can see how a small business or even mid-size and large processor, really no person is going to be able to hold all of that and drive a lot of deep analytics about it. Wayne, relocalize is really throwing, in many ways, that traditional or, what the supply chain has evolved to be one that's often, integrated across a lot of different players and a lot of food miles. Curious what you think the blind spot is, in the current supply chain.
Well, when I looked at where we see huge innovation in manufacturing production right now, a lot of it's coming out of China, right? And when you look at what they're doing something different than us. The big blind spot for us compared to them, frankly, right now, is that we're still thinking of supply chain as something to optimize, right? And what really need to be thinking is how do we redesign, right? If we want to have efficiency and we want to have resilience, we have to design in that efficiency and resilience. And you can't just do that by playing with a little piece of the chain over here and a little piece over there. You have to take a step back and really think about how do you change that supply chain? How do you redesign what you're doing? In our case, which is just one small example, is going from centralization to decentralization, right? And I think when you have a lot of little factories all over the place, the dogma right now would be, oh, that's going to be more expensive. You can't do that. But actually, when you look at the cost of trucking, especially right now, thanks to what's going on in the world in Iran, but even before, you know what, it is possible in some cases, not every case, but in some cases to decentralize and actually increase your gross margin. But you're going against kind of that conventional thinking. Like, so I'd say the blind spot is, yeah, think big, think about redesigning and challenge dogma.
Yeah, and certainly as we begin to think about food security as part of our domestic security and our ability to feed our country, within our own borders as being incredibly important, that's, I think you're right. It's not just tweaks, it's a redesign. Doug, you
You're right,
want to
Alex.
jump in?
There's a
Oh,
value to
sorry.
resilience. All right, there's a value to
Yeah,
resilience, right? And
yeah,
we should value
absolutely.
it, not look at it as a cost.
Doug, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just had an additional point there that innovation should really just be part of everyday business, that it shouldn't be about building the confidence to innovate or take a risk, which is typically related to innovation. I think that should be just part of every single day of business and that it should be part of the DNA of every company. You have to innovate to survive and grow, and it shouldn't be something that's exceptional. We should do it no matter what.
I 100% agree with you. I would just argue that I think the reality in some businesses, especially as we look at the dominance in the Canadian food sector of small and mid-sized players, is that that's to say a 10-person company, for example, needs to be innovating every day. The owner, operator, or founder of that company is probably wearing a lot of hats. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse. I think that then there are some key requirements for, regulation and taxation to be made simpler. That, organizations like CFIN need to be working with these players in order to help them. But yeah, it's a big mandate to manage all the elements of a food business, whether it's packaging, food safety, operational efficiency, cash flow management. It's a lot of moving pieces, and people don't necessarily start a food business because they're experts in AI or tech adoption. They start it because they make a mean X product, or they have they think they have a brand or a need within the market for a particular product.
If I can add, our company's made up of more than 80 innovative entrepreneurial partners within our company. And we wouldn't have seen the 45-fold growth that we've had in the last 20 years if it were not for that small entrepreneurial mindset. That is really an engine that drives our company to tremendous growth and success because of that small entrepreneurial mindset that constantly looks to create, find a pathway to find a way to make the
To
cost
make it
of goods
happen.
sold work, to make that new product, to that hunger to succeed in those small operators. It's an amazing energy that you really got to foster. And I think that's probably our biggest strength in Canada is the 8,000 food processors, of which 80% are small operators.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a tenacity required. And, especially today, I think if we look, we were already coping with some very high food inflation numbers and challenging operating environments. And of course, now we're increasing fuel costs by, I think, 25%, if not more, I think in the last 6 weeks. Um, Wayne, going back to you, through this reimagination of the supply chain and bringing production closer to the consumer, how can this decentralized approach offer a path for processors and distributors to reduce their exposure? These transport and import shocks are huge, and we saw it repeatedly in the report. I'm curious how relocalization or hyper-localized solutions are trending obviously in face of that.
Yeah, so I mean, when you look again, you mentioned the situation in Iran, you've mentioned oil and commodity shocks, and we went through COVID not too long ago. I think one thing is very clear that smaller business, decentralization, that can mean what we're doing, technology-based decentralization. It can be more support for smaller businesses, and regional manufacturers across Canada. But a decentralized approach just reduces our dependence on energy. It reduces our dependence on the United States. It's about resilience, right? And I think, we've been hearing a lot right now, you see stuff in the New York Times about dark factories and lights out manufacturing. There's all kinds of stuff in the press about automation, right? And about cobots and AI. And we're really getting to the point where with physical AI, it gets possible for a small local business or a business that's trying to be a bigger business with lots of local locations to actually use the same tools that the large companies can use. And so I think we're really right on the edge of being able to doing a lot more. And centralization is the easy button, an easy thing to do. Decentralization is hard. So I'm not saying that this is an easy thing to do, but decentralization is possible. And when you can deliver on it, it can really deliver benefits for a local community. It can deliver benefits for our country from a resilience perspective. And just like the report said, right, we're strong at the what was it? It said strong at the gate, the farm gate, but weak in the middle,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah,
you talked about
absolutely.
80% of 88% or 85% of peas are grown here, but then we're processing none of them. Again, these are all things where, wow, I mean, that's a missed opportunity. That's a strategic, that's a real opportunity, maybe for a micro factory, maybe for a regular factory. But these are the opportunities we need to seize on in order to, work in a world where shocks and resilience are actually critically important to our country.
Hmm. Yeah, and if I can just dive in a bit for some of our audience who may not know, because I obviously know a little bit about you. I've got one of your fake ice cubes that you test your unit with right here. The food miles and fuel that you've been able to remove out of the ice supply chain with your projects in Florida, which I think prior to you producing ice in this distribution center and behind your photo, your clients were bringing ice in from other parts of the United States on refrigerated reefer trucks. So the fuel cost and the profitability that you've been able to restore to a supply chain that probably none of us ever think about. In fact, I know I'd never thought about until I met you and learned about your technology is pretty fascinating. And if we think about other spaces, beverage, for example, how many of us are addicted to bubbly water? It's a can of bubbles of air and water and some
Yeah.
flavoring that's shipped all over this country with an enormous amount of fuel behind that operation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it breaks convention, but when you look at fuel costs, for packaged ice, transportation is the number one cost. If you can cut 90% of fuel, and we can do that up to 90, that also is 90% of fuel costs, and that makes a big difference. And there's probably a peas example too of a micro factory at the farm gate too.
Yeah,
Same benefit.
absolutely. Yeah. Uh, Luke, we can't fix what we can't see. So digital infrastructure, I think, is an invisible part of resilience. And I'm curious how you've seen data and better traceability and accessibility of that data allow SMEs to compete on that global playing field, against players that might have maybe more scale, but perhaps less agility, less, as a result of their size.
Yeah, for sure. Well, better data really is critical for your operations. The data that you have is essentially the backbone of your decision making, your forecast, really how you plan and execute on your business plan. But yeah, really where I see SMEs can get a competitive edge is by using this data for the AI powered efficiency gains, like I mentioned earlier. I firmly believe that the next era of the food supply chain is pretty much upon us now. It's one that's data driven, it's AI powered and optimized, but the businesses that don't adopt AI will essentially be outpaced by the competition. So the advantage for SMEs is I think they have much less red tape when it comes to adopting new technology and implementing new technology. They're naturally more agile and less rigid in this sense. And to touch on Doug's point from earlier, an innovation mindset should really be part of the fabric of your organization. But a culture of innovation is much easier to foster and maintain at a smaller company. I've seen this throughout my own career. It's very easy to adopt new technology and new innovations when the company is smaller. And it's fantastic that you guys have that innovation culture, Doug. But you can use this agility to your advantage and get ahead of the curve, get ahead of your competition. And really, when we come back to the data, the quality of the data inputted definitely correlates to the quality of the outputs with AI. So having better data, capturing more data of your organization is really the crux here.
Yeah, and I think that at least some members within CFIN that I've run into who are on the smaller side are still at the good data capture, but there are really creative, low cost ways to do that, whether it's, fairly affordable cameras being implemented on the line, et cetera, or even using certain pieces of end of line automation equipment to capture your day's inventory changes, for example. But capturing data is really important. Doug, love to hear from you.
Yeah, Luke had an excellent point there that AI, like mo most other parts of our business, should just be ubiquitous. It's a tool that we use on a regular basis. It can be deployed whether, you're making hyperspectral imaging systems or, our friend in Waterloo, or you're using ChatGPT as a tool to sort through PDFs and things like that. It shouldn't intimidate us. But the one, and excellent point, because it's a project of mine, AI, for our company, and the resistance I get on it, as much as it's common sense to use ubiquitously, is time. Our business is hard to do. We have a challenge in operating to meet sales, to meet demands. I mean, Keenan will live this every single day, where you've got customer orders, you've got pricing, you've got competitors, you've got retail concentration where the demands are amplified significantly. The supply chains can be challenging in obtaining reliable supply to meet the quality requirements, and in all of the complexity that goes with that. Why wouldn't you want to make your business easier by using AI-powered financial analysis tools or AI-powered supervision tools or aids like SCADA systems in your manufacturing plants, which are available, but the adoption is very low because we're very busy operating our businesses and we don't invest enough time to free ourselves to do the other parts of our businesses. And I think that might be the biggest challenge we face in our businesses is capacity to manage change and growth.
Luke, I'll go to you, and then I'm going to bring Keenan into the conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, just to follow on that, Doug, yeah, we've seen this time and time again. How we like to operate is to give people quick wins in their day, automating some busy work that actually frees up a bit of time so they can invest in these longer term projects that will give you more insights and help you capture more information. But yeah, for sure, you definitely need to start with quick wins that actually gives people time back in their day.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Something I often say is we really need to be giving more business owners the opportunity to work on their business as opposed to in their business. And that's a really critical key component to taking that step back and driving the operation forward. Keenan, I want to bring you in first if you have any comments based on the conversation
Yeah,
that's been happening.
just on that point, I think we're still a ways out from physical AI, but we already have digital AI in these products that are Claude and Gemini. And in our administration, it's been transformative. We our compliance, all of these obligations on us are profound, disproportionate to our business. And these tools have just been such a productivity enhancer. And I think it's really empowering to small businesses to have these tools because they can now handle complexity on a level of a much larger company. So it really levels the playing field and it's just getting started. So we've been really aggressive with getting our 11 staff using it every day to speed up their work. And it's really amazing. If you told me 5 years ago that you could do these, what it does now in Excel, and I know we're still new to it. There's still more to come, but it's just amazing.
Yeah, well, I signed up for my second subscription today to a different. I'm now comparing Gemini and Claude, so I'm with you. Also integrating it daily into my work, and I think that from an administrative perspective, that's probably the easiest piece in a way to kind of chip off and begin to chew on. Another tricky part, which we're all facing, of course, is the pressures we face on our actual production floors. And our report identified automation needs to be a key lever for domestic resilience. That in face of a major set of labor shortages that the sector's been facing for a long time, and is only going to get worse. Uh, but of course, automation comes with a cost, and I'm curious, Keenan, within your business, how have you been managing that cost of modernization, of investing in new technology to sort of make your product, with the immediate need to protect your margins in a pretty tough part of the market, as you sort of identified already.
Yeah, it's a bit of a high wire act, that balance. But at the end of the day, automation is the only way that we can scale up our Canadian manufacturing in order to, as Wayne was saying, those 80% of peas for Sprague to take those peas and make it into soup and then compete with the much cheaper imports, Habitat made by Campbell's. Automation is the only way. Um, but from first-hand experience, there's some caveats to that. Automation, you need to have certain conditions in place. You need to know that you have a future with the process you're automating. You don't want to be automating too early. We've made that mistake and wish we had that capital back. So you want to make sure you're confident in the line and process you're automating. You also want to know that the automation is going to do what the vendors claim it's going to do because they get paid once you buy it, but they don't necessarily have a vested interest in it actually working out. So you really want to kick the tires. And then for us, knowing that it won't impact the quality of your food, I've seen local examples of in automation being applied to, I won't give details, but certain products. And you can see in the customer reviews, there's a noticeable impact. Now that might work out for them. That might the business advantage of that scale might offset what they've compromised on quality. But it's just something to keep in mind. We are making food, especially those processors who are adding value. It's as much of a culinary experience as a commodity.
Mhm.
So automating intelligently. But there's a reason there's been a lack of automation, and that's just because there's been a lack of margins. Low margins equals low investment equals low automation. So it's a bit of a catch 22.
And it's not the easiest capital market from a commercial standpoint either. It's not simple as a small or medium-sized business to go get large-scale financing for modernization, especially sometimes when the stuff is the real necessary but much less sexy type of investment. Sometimes that doesn't track as well. Doug, you've got, I think, 10 companies in the Belmont Food Group, all operating at mid to sort of large, small size. What's been your experience in terms of balancing automation and capital costs?
So yeah, we operate right across North America, and I spend a lot of time in various jurisdictions. And in I think the biggest gain in automation is scale. As Keenan said, it comes down to return on investment. If you don't have the volume to push through, quite often automation equipment exceeds the IRR needed to make it make sense. So how do you compete when it's a constant race to the bottom on productivity? Your cost of goods sold. I think the one primary advantage we have, which has been a flip, is labor wages in Canada are lower than in the US. There used to be an advantage where we would turn our nose up against American operators and they don't pay well enough. Trust me, our US operations are paying more than we do in
Hmm.
Canadian dollars. The wages in the US have gone up incrementally, but they have the scale and the economics to invest where we'll put more automation in a larger US operation than we do. We struggle to justify that. We have invested in our Canadian operations in automation. It's very attractive, but it is hard. And I challenge companies like ATI out of Cambridge, who is the world's largest automation integrator that built their business around auto and maybe pharmaceutical, uh, to really come to the food industry and work with us to find a way to make automation meet the IRR rather than have an engineer come in and say, under perfect world, this is it, and it's $3.5 million a robot, and your EBITDA doesn't align to make that make sense. So I think challenging Canadian automators to find a way to make the cost and the threshold work rather than just say, I'll sell it to somebody else who's willing to pay. I think we need to, the biggest innovation that we could do is find a way to make technology A, domestic, and B, cost attractive enough for our unique industry. And that's the primary barrier that we have, I know, as you know, Alex, I spend a lot of time looking at incenting and attracting investments to Ontario. And one of the biggest things that I find when I'll throw out some engineered solution is the IRR is not attractive enough for the scale that we have. And rationalizing operations into one large plant is not the solution as well.
No, I think as you're noting, there are risks then, and as Keenan noted around the product taste and capability. And I think one of the challenges that I've seen, even in my role prior to CFIN, when I was working with food and beverage manufacturers on their grant applications, was I did see projects where the equipment was purchased and I went in 6 months later and it was sitting in a corner. I can think of at least two examples of that. That's not that many out of the amount that I did, but it does happen more often than we like to admit. But I do think that, and I'm curious about whether or not AI and sort of the advancements in digital tech will give us more flexible automation solutions because most food manufacturers in Canada, as you're noting, are running too large of a diversity of product, either on the same line or through some of the same key pieces of equipment. And so, yeah, a robot that just plunks, a 12 pack of Diet Coke doesn't make sense. You need something that can handle, your muffins, your croissants, whatever you're putting through that line, because the reality is most of the companies we have here are not yet at the size where they're plunking down. Yeah, this is my line for this. This is my line for that. They're operating extremely flexible operations. And as noted, none of the products have a strong enough margin on them where all of a sudden going to spend $2 million on a piece of equipment without, some major significant volumes, let's say with a national or global retailer, the business case just isn't there.
I do think this is evolving right now. I mean, again, our CTO, he was comes from the automotive industry and robotics and control systems. And, robots used to be expensive. Integration used to be a huge exercise. And if you look a little bit forward to what's coming, and AI is a big part of it, the cost of robotics has been in free fall, right? And the intensity and the cost and the projects that Doug was talking about, the integration exercises, these can be really hard. Well, there are companies now like Vention, it's palletizing out of a box, right? And I don't think we have to be a bit patient, but ABB Robotics was just bought by SoftBank, and everything you'll see what they're doing right now is about actually making that process of the integration as easy as possible. And when you look again to China and what they're doing, again, they're deploying robots at, an order of magnitude more than the United States and Canada right now. And they're deploying them, but the use is being taught in the field by the users. So the welder is moving it around and doing the motions, right? This is not the way traditional integration works. It's not the way traditional robotics worked. And it's happening right now in China. If it can happen there, it can happen here. And I think we have to, again, challenge ourselves to maybe be on the cutting edge a little bit and look what's happening in China. Look what's happening with even some of our own startups like Vention or Relocalize or others. There are ways to bring down the cost of automation and make it accessible to companies like Sprague Foods and companies like the companies that are smaller than what Doug and Keenan's companies.
Luke, you want to chime in?
Yeah, one thing I'd just like to add as well is like obviously the automations on the manufacturing floor are very expensive, but there's a lot you can do in terms of back office automations now. Cheaply and effectively implementing AI agents, not just simple AI tools to manage entire business functions. Like we're working with our early customers now to run the entire sales order to cash cycle completely with AI agents and their full customer support processes. So the AI agent wave that's coming now as well is really, really impressive. And being on this side of the laptop and seeing and working with it day in, day out, I can really see what's coming. And yeah, it can do so much more than just glean insights from masses of text now. It can really handle entire business functions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about this whole segment we've just done here, when we talk about encouraging more automotive players to look at food, CFIN actually has a number of portfolio companies, one of whom being gastronomists. They pulled their sort of head up from, some successful businesses in automotive, exited from that, and we're looking at where to go next. And they actually looked at food service and have been very successful in creating automated grills. And when they did deploy them at Harvey's, no one, by the way, was complaining that the burgers didn't taste good anymore. They actually saw an uptick in Google reviews for the location where people were going, I don't know what this Harvey's is doing, but these burgers are amazing. So that's on the cooking side, less so on the manufacturing, but that piece is certainly happening. And another thing that we're seeing more and more is, as noted by Wayne, the robotics cost or robotics are becoming more and more the commodity, and it's more about the rich software integration and ease of use, whether it's something like our company DeepSight using different AR augmented goggles, whether it's the HoloLens or whatever, to deploy, on the floor training that's super effective, or whether we're looking at groups who are deploying, food delivery robots that are now pretty much much more commoditized. You don't have to build it yourself. You just need to build the software and the user experience that allows them to be really deployed effectively. Doug?
Yeah, and I think, optimism and positivity, like Wayne's demonstrating very clearly, are needed. Absolutely. But realism in the food industry, we work in with organic matter, and as what Keenan talked about around quality and organoleptic sensory practices around food. I mean, you eat food because of its organic nature. And I think deploying and integrating better vision systems, AI, technology to try and find a way to duplicate the thinking and the sensing process that we do, where a production line can make better judgment decisions
Hmm.
as opposed to linear judgment decisions. A lot more creative perspective. It is very hard when you're making thousands of kilos of bacon an hour to make it meet those standards. But everyone that purchases that package expects it to look perfect. And that is a challenge because the materials coming in, it's not like a video game. Hogs change their shape, but the bacon looks very uniform. And to accomplish that, a human being does it very well, not as efficiently as a machine, but integrating and better integrating vision systems, automation, AI intelligence, and full line integration, I think is key to being able to bring that sense to it. And I think it's completely lacking. And Wayne, we're a large company. We're about 9.5 billion
Yeah,
across our
you guys are
companies, and we
big.
still struggle. We still struggle with that justification, partly because of what I just said is, but can it do what the humans do as well? Maybe integrating, as Luke talks about, where you have cobots and you have collaborative automation. I think that might be very useful, but that is a challenge that we face in automation.
Interesting. I do have some questions in the Q&A box, and we have some time left, but I would encourage you, if you're listening and you have some things that you might like our panelists to address or us to talk about, to put it in there, because I will be consulting it shortly. And I actually do have one for you, Doug, that's quite relevant. And it's someone's asking, what is the target IRR for capital investment? I bet that might be an answer. Perhaps Keenan might have an opinion on it. It'll change perhaps on your sector, I assume, or your space.
Did you want me to go?
You can go ahead. Yeah,
Oh, 15%.
that's
18
your.
is better. 30 is even better.
Keenan, do you guys have an IRR you work to in your operations as a goalpost, or is it more flexible and ad hoc than that?
Yeah, you're really exposing an area I should know more about.
No, no, we're not here to put
This
you
is
in the
why I'm
hot
here.
seat. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, that's great. And, one thing I'm curious about actually in all of your businesses that perhaps from different perspectives, Wayne and Luke, you're bringing on very high tech individuals into your business. You're recruiting sometimes the STEM grads that I think a food business would love to be able to attract, but can't always do it. Are your employees excited about working in food and impacting this part of our economy? Luke, perhaps start with you.
Yeah, everyone's very passionate about the food supply chain. We tend to hire people who have past experience in the food supply chain in some sense. Like I come from a family business processing meat. My co-founder Connor comes from a family farm back in Ireland. So we've tried to hire people who have a good understanding of the problems that are prevalent throughout the industry. And yeah, everyone's definitely very excited. But I should note as well, like we use AI throughout our own organization very effectively. So we're quite a small team. And even like as an engineer, I'm trained as a software and machine learning engineer. I probably haven't written a line of code in probably about 6 months or more, I'd say, just because I'm using Cloud Code to do all the busy work there. So we're definitely a very lean team, and we'll definitely continue to stay lean as we grow.
Great. And Wayne, what about you? You probably have having senior machines. I don't think you can outsource it all to Claude, unfortunately.
No, I mean hardware is hard to outsource, but when you're building an autonomous system, I mean autonomy in manufacturing is extremely difficult. A lot of that comes from software, right? And so,
Mhm.
I mean but yeah, I guess the first question really was, are people excited? And I think yes. Working for a startup is fun, right? It's purpose. Not that everybody's work is, I don't not to mean that anybody else's work is less purposeful than ours, but people who love technology like to play with new things. And I think that is
Mhm.
kind of a challenge, right? So it would be hard, I think, for Keenan or Doug to probably recruit the members of my team because they want to play with new stuff. But I don't think that means that companies cannot access talent like that. I think it's through companies like ours, right? Because you can put together that group of people that just get up every day to say, I want to do something cool with a robot today, right? And hiring those people is very expensive, and keeping them engaged and interested is very difficult. But when they can work on Keenan's project or Doug's project, um, but still and bring on new challenges each day, I think there's a great opportunity for startups to be working with especially companies like theirs, right? Because one, they become customers, but two, it allows smaller companies or larger companies even, because a lot of tech people don't want to work for a large company that's not doing tech. And so it allows people to access that kind of talent, even if they don't have it in-house.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that, not many people want to pack boxes, but more and more people do want to be using technology in their jobs. And certainly, we've heard from food processors who are adopting more and more tech that it does allow them to be more successful in recruiting younger employees. We are getting tight on time, so I'm going to get to our last question and take one from the Q&A thing. But in 30 seconds or less, I'd like each of you, and I'll call you out one at a time, to give me one thing a Canadian food SME should start doing today to protect their margins, and one thing they should stop doing. And I'm going to open with Doug, and remember, it's 30 seconds or less, Doug.
Stop being alarmist, stop being negative, concentrate on the positive.
I love that. Keenan, you want me to cue you up next?
Sure, and this is more advice to myself, but as a disruptive, insurgent brand, the temptation is always to grab market share by investing in price. And in the context of profit and loss, the math is the math. It's not as sustainable. So start saying no and stop saying yes, to balance the temptation to keep, you know, acquiescing to retailers' drive for lower and lower
Right.
prices.
Yeah. Wayne.
All right. So things we need to stop doing. I mean, we have to stop treating volatility as temporary, right? I think Mark Carney said it pretty well at Davos. Like the old order is not coming back, and it's not only about politics. It's also just about you know, oil shocks, pricing shocks, climate. There's so much change, and even just AI, just the change in technology, change in society that's coming over the coming years. We can't treat it as temporary, and a lot of businesses are still operating in the old world. They're hoping it'll come back. They're going to do things the way they always did it because it worked well for them. But they have to start thinking about innovation, as I think, as Doug said, as a positive, and start thinking about those constraints as an opportunity. Because the people who learn how to work under constraints, countries like Ukraine, with not having the right weapons, they created a whole new way of waging war, right? That constraint will make them stronger in the end, and
Creates.
make us
Yeah.
stronger. Sorry, that was 35
No,
seconds.
no, it's okay. And Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty straightforward one. It's definitely to stop your team from spending any more hours on manual data entry and copying data from one system into another. It's a massive time sink, and really start using AI and AI agents to handle these processes. Anywhere that your team saves an hour on writing emails, inputting data is an hour they can spend with customers or analyzing their suppliers.
Amazing. I love all of those. I've got one question from the Q&A, and it's a long one, so I'm going to get, or there's some great context to it. So I'm going to open with that and see if anyone wants to take a swing at it. Business confidence was highlighted as one of the biggest concerns for Canadian food processors. Obviously, it's hard to rebuild that conference or confidence when there's so much out of their control. One of the major costs food processors deal with is electricity, and it is a cost that can be managed. And so the person asks, how does CFIN see energy innovation fitting into the business confidence conversation? And I would say it certainly does. And we actually will be launching some programs later this year around driving more innovation in green and sustainable technologies for the food sector. But I'll open it. I know Doug, I've been to a couple presentations with Doug on energy, so I know he probably has some hot, interesting takes on that question.
So, it's a small world, and the fellas in the chat there from Green Innovators, I had a chat with a couple weeks ago, and the key thing around solar and battery storage systems, which are great. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a smart way to generate energy. Is the threshold for IRR, for the return on investment, and there's programming that Scott in the chat can tell you about that makes it work. And so you have to really look at incentives and programming to make these energy innovations work, because on their own, the cost of electricity in Canada, in Ontario particularly, is low enough that it makes it hard to. And I'm not encouraging anyone to raise the prices, but it is low enough that it's cost prohibitive to do that. But now incentives and programming make energy like solar and battery photovoltaic systems great projects.
hmm And another area where, again, you might see China considering or conducting major investments in solar over the past little while. And I think now one of their major dominant energy sources. We're getting to the end, and so I'm going to pause it there on questions. But I want to thank Doug, Keenan, Wayne, and Luke for joining us, sharing, honestly and giving us some great insights from your various perspectives, your diverse perspectives. I learned a lot. I think the reality is, and we all recognize that it's a tough world. It's a changing world, one in which we probably can't all grasp on our own. And so, technology, perhaps an AI agent, can help us digest some of this changing world. But I actually have been to a lot of events and, talking about this report, and you start to feel a little depressed, saying how tough it is. But I actually have been to many events where everyone in the food sector at the same time feels quite hopeful. And I think it's because we're hearing a lot of people sing from the same songbook and a lot of consistent, narratives and messages being delivered, which I think is super important. And, I think we have a lot of hope that, we're being heard in terms of on the regulatory front, on the capital front, and on terms of, getting out of the way of our businesses and supporting them as they drive growth in their operations. So thank you again. Thank you to the audience. I haven't had a chance to read the chat, but from the number of notifications, I can see it's been a little bit off the hook. I want to invite you all, if you are interested in some of what we talked about today, to join our next webinar. It's on tech adoption in action, and we'll be featuring Mode 40 and Non-Such Brewing, a case of agentic AI changing a small business. And we'll be dropping a link in the chat if you'd like to register. We invite anybody who's on the call who's not a member of CFIN to join, which is a great reminder for me to do this. And I welcome you to join CFIN as a member. And I'm going to go ahead and share a screen here that gives you insight on how you can do that. We have a number of membership tiers. Our CFIN Plus is a paid membership designed for food tech innovators, manufacturers, entrepreneurs, folks such as yourself who are looking to accelerate your growth. And CFIN Plus members get access to data, insights, exclusive partner offers, and direct support to help turn ideas into impactful solutions. And we also have our CFIN partner level. So if you are a fellow ecosystem supporter or a service provider, and you're looking to connect directly with small to medium-sized food and beverage manufacturers, innovators, or other members of our ecosystem, our partnership level can create custom offers, help drive lead generation, and allow you to receive targeted exposure and a platform to showcase your thought leadership within Canada's fast-growing food innovation ecosystem. And so welcome you or encourage you to check out either of those options. And with that, I will say again, thank you for your attention. I just want to express my gratitude for all of you dedicating your time to us. And thanks for, spending the last hour with us today. We hope to see you again soon. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to our panelists. Bye.